So, welcome to another episode of the Imperfectly Perfect podcast, where each week I'm joined by some of the world's most renowned faces in the entertainment industry, on the sports field, corporate leaders, and inspirational thought leaders around the world, each sharing their own truths and personal journeys. Today, we have none other than Jacinta Tynan, who's a journalist, author, columnist, and former news presenter, most recently with Sky News Australia. For more than a decade, Jacinta was a regular columnist for Sunday Life and has also contributed to various other publications, including the Sydney Morning Herald, Mind Food, Escape and Kids Sport. After stepping away from a news anchoring career in 2020, Jacinta turned her attention to her other great passions, human potential. Earning a diploma in positive mental health, she's now a qualified life coach, the perfect synergy for her regular Body and Soul column on spirituality, in which she explores spiritual concepts and modalities. She does all this while raising her two young boys in Sydney, meditating daily, and I couldn't be more happy to bring her onto the show. So first and foremost, welcome, Jacinta. So I was just saying to the audience, I'm so excited to get you on the show finally. It has been some time. Obviously, you got behind this mission, this movement. What, 4 years ago it's come to now. Can you believe it? And Jacinta, must I say, like, you got behind it and you not only got me on Sky News once, but twice. So first and foremost, thank you very much and welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I wouldn't have got you on if I didn't see some merit in what you're doing. And it's just grown exponentially since then.
Yeah, it hasn't. The funny thing is, like, every time anyone goes to the official website or the YouTube channel, the first face that they see is yourself. So you literally took it to America and everything. That sky opening of it's gone global, it's gone to America. So every single person that I send it to, from Hollywood to corporate leaders to everybody, it's your face. So as I say, I mention and I give merit to yourself and Karen Ledbury for all the help that you always were. But I suppose when I bring it back to things, and I always say there was this guy who literally knew nobody, who essentially just reached out through social media, and people often find that strange and go, you really just reached out by Instagram or sent a quick email and you actually got somebody to respond to you. So can you just take us back and just what drew you to the campaign?
I remember seeing something on social media, and that is one of the beauties of social media, isn't it? That so many messages can reach people that they wouldn't ordinarily reach necessarily. So I can't remember what it was. Your beautiful photography, I think, that the vulnerable shots you took of people that we don't always see in that way. And I think it was an image that grabbed me first, and then I read about what you were doing. And at the time I was, as you know, an anchor at Sky News, and I had started a segment called The Changemakers, where I was getting people on who were making a difference in the world. So you fitted that brief beautifully. So it's win-win, right? So
Yeah.
I reached out to you to get you on, and that is exactly the sort of thing I was trying to focus on. Your images are just so powerful. Not just because you're a great photographer, of course, but you obviously managed to get your subjects to really be vulnerable and forget that the camera's there, and that's what's so compelling about them.
Well, thank you. And it's something that I do want to touch upon with you a little bit later, that I've come to find out more in terms of spiritual nature, that I was able to tap into something that I never knew when I began this. And I know that you went down the spiritual route. But before we get into that, just for a little bit of premise, I obviously came out with your bio and let people know from my perspective as to all the amazing things that you're known for here in Australia and your writing and being an author. But can you just take us on a little bit of journey from where it started, what delved you into the career as a journalist and then an author, and now an affluent life coach that's helping other people empower others?
It all starts with storytelling, I think. When I go right back to childhood, because that's where our dreams begin, right? And so often we cloud them with other things. I wanted to be an actor. That was all I ever wanted to do when I was young. And that was like my calling from such a young age. And even though I haven't pursued that path, I have studied acting and done bits here and there, it's still the same thing. It's about sharing stories. And the reason I love stories so much is because I think that and I love real stories more than anything. And photography like yours is storytelling. And it's because I think that it's in the vulnerability and the sharing of others that we see ourselves. And we know we're not alone when we can hear somebody else be really generous. It's a generous act, I think, to share what's going on for them, the good and the bad, and the deep suffering that they might have been through. And when they're open about that, that allows the rest of us to see that we're not alone. Other people have been through this too. And so I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of sharing other people's stories because I have that skill of being a writer, and I have that skill of being able to communicate. So I see myself as a bit of a conduit to be able to do that, as well as I'm a bit impartial to sharing my own stories as well, because I see the merit in that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. But I want to take it a bit deeper with you, because I know when I came to Sky News and I was sat there and I was watching how effortlessly you made it look, and everyone was go, 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 and it was this, that, and the other. That was essentially 1 hour of me sat there watching that production. I can only imagine behind the scenes and the production and everything you've got to do with research and everything, all this. So take away the noise and everything. What was the change in the career? Was it during the pandemic that you learned to look more internal? Because in your industry, in that entertainment industry, it is full of the external noise and go, 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 go. And how did you learn to tap out of that and tap into more of who Jacinta was always meant to be?
This is such a good question. And you've said you wanted me to go deeper, and there's no way I can't to answer that question. It's a combination of things. So I believe in the universe and a higher power. And I believe that the universe stepped in. I was retrenched from my job at Sky News during the pandemic. And I've always been really open about that. You know, when you lose a job like that, they do say to you, you can say whatever you want and we'll back you. And that's when you see people in the media often say, I just want more time with my family. Look, often they do. Of course, genuinely they do, because the media can rob you of that time. But a lot of the time that's not the case. And there was no way I wasn't going to be honest about that. A whole lot of us, a swathe of us in the media just got retrenched at that time, and there's no shame in that. So I was open about that. But it was actually, while it was a worry for me, because I am a single mom of 2 kids, and I did have that initial, oh my God, how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to do this? There was also, just beneath that, there was another part of me that was really excited and really hopeful, because I had been inauthentic in that role for quite some time. And I wanted to be a journalist. And then that sort of led to news reading, which I enjoyed, but it got to a point in the last few years where I thought, this isn't right. Every part of me was screaming that. And I think it's because chicken or the egg, right? So I've been going on this more spiritual journey for quite a few years now, a good decade, I'd say. Well, all my life, really. But since I learned to meditate is when things really shifted for me, which was 13 years ago. And then I would sit there reading the news every night, which is such an important role. That there's that, I'm not taking away from that. It's an important role, of course, to share that information. It's such a privilege to have that role. However, for me, it wasn't working anymore, because I was sharing this negativity. That was my job, to tell everybody all the really bad things that were happening in the world. And while it's important that people know this stuff, for me, it wasn't working. And I've written about this, but I was at the point where I was going home crying on my way home every night, because it just didn't feel right anymore. And I thought, how am I going to get out of this? I felt really trapped, because I needed a job, because I'm a single mom, and because I also want to have a career and I want to keep my hand in there. It was too good from there. Let me just think about it. And so I needed something to step in and make a change for me, because I didn't have the courage to do it myself. And I knew something had to give, but it was too good to stay, and it was too bad to leave. And Actually, it was the other way around. It was too good to leave, and it was too bad to stay. I was in that situation, and that's why I started the Changemakers. Actually, that segment you were on, because I was doing this job that didn't feel aligned with me, and I was consciously thinking, how can I do something with this platform that I've got to make a difference and spread some positive news out there in the world. So I created that segment just so I at least felt like I was doing something more in tune with what I wanted to do in the world. And then as it happens, and as is a beautiful timing of the universe, as it always is, no matter what, good or bad, it stepped in, and it was just really good timing that it was time for me to go and do something that was more in tune with where I was heading internally as well.
Wow, I love that. And the reason why, when I started reading about it, I was like, I always say to everybody, and people will be fed up of hearing it on the podcast, but I say I was never brought up around spirituality, religion. I'm not religious, but a lot of people of faith kept coming towards me. And when it went to America and more, I was having gurus, I was having shamans, whatever you want to call them. And they were like, Glenn, this is being led. Do you know that? And I was like, what do you mean? What the bloody hell are you talking about? It's being led. Yes, I'm working hard, but what do you mean? And the more I started tapping out of the noise and tapping in, trying to do the meditation, and I asked you about the noise because when you're in production or you're go, 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 like I was as well in terms of what I was doing, it's very hard to get out of your logic and tap inwards. So I found that really hard. But to this day now, I have stepped forward and I've got a very supportive group of spiritual people who have been mentoring me, teaching me, learning things, and doors have continued opening. And it's by surrendering to the process a lot more. So do you feel like as soon as you just let go, and I say let go, give God, just surrender to the process and keep walking, and you don't actually know what's next, but you're actually okay with it?
Yes, I've become really au fait at surrendering. I have read lots of great books. Michael Singer writes about surrender, and I love his books particularly. And so I really have consciously gone into that. I'm really fascinated by that sphere, and I've done a lot of it myself. So things have really hit rock bottom for me in the last few years. I'm coming out of it now, but I've been through a really tough separation and raising my kids as a single mum, and then losing my job. Although I don't say losing my job, I say that I was released from my job because it wasn't right for me. It was right for someone else, but not for me. So with all of those things, I've had some really frightening moments. I've been in a state of fear. And the only thing you can do then, well, the best thing you can do then is just to surrender. And I've done it. I've been on the floor, those dark nights of the soul. And I wrote about this in my last book, The Single Mother's Social Club. I wrote about those nights, we've all had them, where you can't sleep and it just all feels so overwhelming. And the only way that I could find peace at those times was, I don't know why you get on the floor. Apparently that's quite religious too. You know, a lot of religions pray on the floor. Apparently that's because
True.
where your heart is closest to your head. But I just didn't know that, but I just felt compelled to get onto the floor. It was the only place I could find some comfort. And I have just prayed and said, help me. I don't know what to do. I'm handing this over. I don't know what to do. And in those moments, something shifts. So you may not get answers. Angels don't fly above you with a banner giving you the answer. Unfortunately, that would be great. But I just felt in those moments some peace, some relief that I could just at least go to sleep and know that everything would be okay. And while I'm down there on the floor, I see the Lego fireman under the bed and think I better get that. And the floor needs a vacuum. And so you realize that you're still on the earth and you're still part of it all, and life goes on. But I have had to throw my trust in a higher source because things have got too tough for me to handle.
Wow, so powerful. I love this conversation, because what would you say ultimately the person that you are now, sat here, and you've got yourself settled in a new place, loving mother to your 2 children, you've gone through that adversity and you've hit rock bottom, but what lessons can you take away from it?
Where do I start? So many. I think the biggest one is trusting. I really got to a place. Also, I don't have to blow dry my hair all the time. That's fantastic. I love that I don't have to see this bird's nest I wasn't able to have when I was reading the news. That's the main lesson I've learned. No, I am digressing and joking. I have learned to trust. And that is such a relief. It's a real relief to be able to just throw my trust in. That's surrendering as well, throwing my trust in universal timing, and just it becomes a bit more light and joyful just to see it all unfold, and almost like a witness. Michael Singer talks about that too, being a witness to your consciousness. So a witness consciousness, he calls it. So it's watching life unfold, and that's interesting. I didn't see that coming, but let me go with that. And so you become, I have got to a place where I believe that everything that happens, even if it doesn't look necessarily good on the outside, whatever good is, I've come to see that all of it is for my best, for my highest self. And so I just go with it. It doesn't mean I don't suffer and struggle and rail against the world and get annoyed and yell and carry on. And I do all that. But then when I can get still and away from that noise that you talk about, that's when I always say, all right, this is meant to happen. What for? What's the lesson for me in this? I always ask myself that. What am I meant to learn from this? Because there's always something. And that's how it all makes sense. That's how it can all make sense. I wanted to just say, with that noise that you were talking about, when I was reading the news, and I forget about that now until you brought it up, but it is that place of constant pressure and deadlines and noise, and it's really invigorating, actually, and it's really a privilege to be a part of that world. But there isn't much time to be still and to think with all of that going on. And so that's what I needed, and that's what I've been gifted now.
Wow. You know, for people that are listening to this episode, and I've openly started speaking more in terms of what I've gone through. And I think it's a sense of I went through personal development, which opens the mind a little bit more to experience other things, and then spiritual nature. And now I just literally say personal relationship with God. When you were talking about praying, so I started doing that. And somebody once sent me a meme, one of my spiritual mentors, I call them, unbeknownst to them. But like you talked about the angels, for anyone listening out there, my friend sent me a meme, and it was like, Glenn's expecting like the red carpet and God coming down and meeting him, and a voice in his head that's just going to talk to him. And you just have to realize, like, there's signs, and there is little nudges, and there is things that you see, serendipitous moments. But for anyone listening out there that hasn't really walked in this path yet, you openly speak about moving away from your marriage, single mother, that you've gone through that adversity. What would you say to any mothers? And we can only speak on a personal experience. What would your advice be? Because you've written several books now, you write about it all the time. And the thing that I love about you when I watch your stuff is you are transparent, and which shows the authentic side of you. And sometimes that you can put an article out and it can get a response that when you were talking about motherhood for yourself was easier than it might be for some people. And you said something that's so entrenched in me when it goes, yeah, but what happened? Conversations had to be started. So what advice would you give to anyone out there that's kind of struggling but listening to everybody else?
Well, first of all, I'm no expert. I am not. I really am not an expert. So I am not a parenting expert, but I guess you're asking for my advice of how I have coped as a mother. For me, it is meditation. It is. Some people don't want to hear that, but I couldn't have got by without it. I learned to meditate when I was pregnant with my oldest son, and he just turned 13. So I've been meditating 13 years. I do Vedic meditation, which is 20 minutes twice a day. So whatever it is you find, that's what I do. And it changed everything for me, everything. It's so powerful. That's why there's so much research showing how powerful meditation is, because it's now scientifically proven how it alters our brain. And it has taught me to be present and more relaxed, and more being able to find the joy in smaller moments, and to be more focused, and so many things. And you sleep better as well, by the way. That's the tip. And also when you meditate, you get the rest, the deep rest that is even more powerful than sleep. So that's another tip for mothers. I think with motherhood, again, it depends where you're at. So the babyhood stage is a whole thing. You're talking about an article I wrote when my son Jasper was born. And people had told me how tough motherhood was. It's all you heard. When I was pregnant, I kept getting the bad press. Everybody kept saying, oh, motherhood's the hardest thing you'll ever do. You'll never sleep again. You'll never go to the movies again. You'll never see your friends again. It's so hard, and it's the hardest job in the world. And so I was really gearing up for that. And I was scared. There was a lot of fear around it. And that's why I learned to meditate. I actually thought, better get something in my toolbox here or I'm going to crash and burn. I'd had depression before. And I thought, I do not want to go down that path. Or who wants to go down that path ever? But I thought, I can't do that as a mother. So I need to find something. And everybody says meditations helps with that. So let me try that. And it was the thing. It really was. And so when my son was born, I kept waiting for the sky to fall in because everybody said it would. And it didn't. It just got better. And that doesn't mean that he didn't do what babies do, waking in the night and crying and wouldn't go to sleep when I wanted him to. And my life went on hold. The rest of my life went on hold, and all the things that are supposed to happen, because that's what's supposed to happen with a newborn. But what we do is we think life's going to go on as it was. And if you can release that expectation and just be present with life is going to change for a while and lean into that, that's where the joy is. So I wrote that article quite naively, I have to say, at the time about everybody says it's so hard. What are they all talking about? And I got slammed and I copped it quite a bit because people thought I was talking about them and criticizing them. I was just talking about my own experience. And I was hoping, as I always do as a writer, that if I share that, then maybe somebody else will see themselves in that too. And that might help someone else, which it did. It did that as well. And then I went on to write the book Mother Zen because of that. That came from that. Well, I wanted to explore, why is it that some people struggle and some don't? So that's the new babyhood stuff. And then with the single motherhood, which is a whole nother story, and my book, The Single Mother's Social Club, which is more recent, focuses on that. But again, if I had to sum it up, that comes back to meditation as well. Or if you don't want to meditate, it's about being present and finding your truth and finding that, listening to that voice within and listening to your intuition. That's the summary of how I managed to stay present and not miss it.
Do you find, with how long you've been in the industry yourself and as a writer, that when criticism comes your way, that you've learned to not deflect it, but almost drown it out? Because there was an area of time when there was an article that came out when somebody came on the campaign, and there was people literally going for the person and then looking at the campaign saying, oh, look, celebrities, cry me a river, and they don't know what it's like, and this. First time I'd experienced it, I took it really personal and just wanted to go, excuse me, but these are people, like, and what you're doing is, and all this. So I found it hard the first time, but then I started to realize, you know what, between all of that, I'm probably reaching somebody who needed to hear that story to make a difference. So is that something that you have in kind of your back pocket, as always thinking that whether there are some people that aren't going to be liking what you have to say, there's going to be that one person that you may just save a life because they needed to hear it?
No, I get really sensitive about it. That's the truth. I don't cop a lot of it now. And if I do, I'm tuned out to it. But that article I wrote about motherhood when my son was born, he was about 10 months old, actually, that hit me really hard. But I've come a long way since then. So there's that. So I wonder if I was to cop that kind of criticism now, I'd probably be a lot better. But back then, it really crushed me. I couldn't go near my computer. It was like if I opened it, it felt like I was opening a box with a monster inside. I had to shut down, and I did question myself, and I did think, oh, I'm a terrible person, and I did go down that path. So I'm easily triggered. I'm very sensitive, and I'm not good if with criticism at all. I do take it on, but I'm getting better and I'm evolving all the time. And I think what happens is it's like you attract experiences that reflect what you think about yourself. And so my self-esteem has come a long way since then, and it probably wasn't in the best place then. And so I was like a magnet for that. Now I'm still very sensitive. Maybe I'll always will be, because that's the beauty of being a creative person too, that we feel things deeply, and I do feel things very deeply. But I've got so much better at just knowing what belongs to me and what doesn't. So when stuff comes at me, whether it's in the media or whether it's personal, I am so much better. And I'm saying this because as I'm saying this, I'm reflecting on how far I've come, actually, thinking, gosh, this used to not be what I was like, but now I can look at something or hear something and think, okay, yeah, I need to take that bit on, but that bit's not mine. It's always good to be open to a bit of constructive criticism or hearing from a trusted source where, oh, maybe there is something I can refine here. There always is, but I'm not taking on other people's stuff anymore.
Yeah, and that's always important. I think one of my big triggers and unhealed traumas I noticed through this was feeling like I was being looked through, over or around, being used and manipulated by certain people. And it just got to me. And as an empath, even as a guy and compassionate and truly wanting to make the best and help other people, I couldn't understand why I was attracting people that would be around me for a certain amount of time. And then it was just like closed doors. And I'd be like, I don't get this. And I was taking it personal. And then something happened with a family member and the way that they was talking to me. And I started realizing it was a trigger point and that I was allowing it to happen. And that was the difference. I was going in this habitual cycle of allowing and attracting it. And then somebody, again, a spiritual mentor, said to me, if you look at things as a test, it's going to keep happening until you learn and you create your barriers and you move forward. And I was like, this is so bloody hard. Like you were saying, whatever your trigger is, it's like, it's hard if you do lead by your heart, because you do want the best for people, but you can't understand why some people will attack. But then again, hurt people. Whatever you've been through, every experience, it's a question that that I ask every single person on the campaign. What does imperfectly perfect mean to you now?
I think it's a great word, a great phrase, by the way, that you came up with. And as you say, you're channeling a bit, right? So it's obviously come to you. So I love that for starters. And what does it mean to me is that we all have flaws, and that if we embrace those flaws, then that's a way to live a much more fulfilled life rather than trying to be something else. And also looking at our own flaws and going within and working on our own stuff rather than blaming outwards. It means that as well. Because so often we want to blame everyone else and circumstances as well, other people, life, stuff that happens for the reason that we're suffering. At whatever form suffering is, suffering happens to the mildest level of being stuck in traffic to huge grief. That's the gamut of suffering. Whatever form suffering takes, it's so much more empowering if we see our role in that. And that's where I think what your phrase means to me.
Love that. And I will just say to anybody listening, it was actually Dan Ewing, a conversation, Home and Away's Dan Ewing. We was having a conversation about things, and he was like, I've got a great life. I do this, but it's not everything. It's just, and I can't remember how he exactly came out with it, but it was the first shoot of the campaign. And he was talking about being imperfectly perfect. And I was like, that is it. And each person I've spoken to since, they'd be like Dr. Jodie Spencer, who's very spiritual, Les Brown, and they'd be like, imperfectly perfect is not of the flesh. That's of the spirit. That has come from somewhere else. And I was like, okay. So the first time people started coming out with a lot of spiritual nature, and I was like, okay. And there was this question that it wasn't a question, it was a statement they kept saying. And they said, Glenn, once you know, you know. And I'm like, what does that mean? And then Dr. Jodie Spencer came on, and he was like, once you know, you know. So after the podcast, and I openly speak about it, I say, what is this thing that I don't know? Like, is this some secret? And he was like, you know that this has been led. He said, you're on a different kind of energy, which is why you knew nobody and the doors have kept opening, because you are leading by that heart. But with that comes a lot of responsibility, a lot of trials, a lot of tests, a lot of tribulation. And I always remember when me and Karen came onto your show, and you just turned around and you was like, congratulations for everything doing. Are you making any money on it yet to actually make sure that you're all right, and things like this? And this journey, emptied my pockets. I've gone to the top, I've gone to the bottom, but I'm still walking, and the lessons that I've learned. So yeah, I just want to say, like, the amount of help that you gave to make this create a ripple effect around the world, like, you'll never know how grateful I am. And I always mention it to you, but if it wasn't for you to get us onto Sky News and how big that platform is, like the amount of people that reached out and said that the stories were actually saving lives. So thank you very much.
That means so much, Glenn. And I always marvel at how you've become really big in your international. I mean, you've had Joe Dispenza on, doesn't get bigger than that. And yet you always mention me and tag me. And I don't need that. I don't need that acknowledgement, but I note it because I think, wow, that says a lot about you, that you're still acknowledging where some of the other people that helped you along the way.
Well, I've been trying so long to get you on the bloody podcast. I'm like, come on, Jacinta.
You
are a busy lady.
You've been very generous in asking me to come on a few times, and it's just been a reflection of all the things going on in my world. But I also know divine timing. So when we're ready to speak about these things, then the moment appears, and it's appeared now. And I think that I actually reflect on how far I've come just in the last probably 2 months. A lot's happened in my own personal growth in that time. I've just come back from Kamalaya in Koh Samui, which is a beautiful spiritual retreat where you have one-on-one mentoring with a former monk.
Wow.
Isn't that a gift? Wow. So this beautiful former monk called Sujay, and I've had lots of sessions with him, and the learnings I had in that time have just been profound, and I feel quite shifted. There's just always another layer to come. And so maybe I was meant to speak to you after that.
You know what, these conversations, I believe it, that divine timing. I had a conversation with someone the other day who has moved out of the media, and she was like, why did you get in touch with me? And I said, well, you helped me at the beginning, but your name popped in my head and I don't know why. And she'd been going through some things, and she'd found a lump in her throat. And what she found out was that she'd hidden a voice. She wasn't speaking out on topics. And through the podcast, she didn't think she'd be able to carry on. But she said after the podcast, it was just flowing. So everything that she'd held in, and she said, it just doesn't make sense why you just get in touch. Like, we're actually good friends, so we touch base all the time. But she said, it's just, I'm not in the media, and you remembered me and you brought me on. And now she's going, I think this were a serendipitous moment. I think divine timing. So like you say, I'm a full believer on that. There might have been something within this conversation that we listen to it afterwards. And I always get wisdom from these conversations off every single person, because I think you just learn all the time. But 2 questions I just wanted to ask you. You have moved into, you've got several books now. You also write for so many outlets, but you're also empowering other people. So with everything you've gone through, how did that come about? Because you went and studied in terms of mental health and life coaching. So what drew you to actually make a change in other people's lives in that respect?
When I left Sky News and was retrenched from the job, I had that moment to reflect, as I mentioned. And actually, let me tell you a little thing as an aside. When I got the phone call from my boss at the time to discuss this retrenchment, there was a big fat grasshopper on the wall, and I'd never seen one before, and I've never seen him since, on the bedroom wall as I was having the conversation. It was homeschooling at the time, so I had the kids in the other room doing their stuff, and so I'd gone into the bedroom to have this conversation. And I thought, what's that grasshopper doing there the whole time I was talking? That's so odd. So I went and searched up what grasshopper means as a spiritual symbol, and it means moving forward, because grasshoppers apparently can't go backwards. So they're all about moving forward. And so that was beautiful, that as an aside. And so I was writing my book, The Single Mother's Social Club, at the time. So I had that project to finish. So all my energy went into that, which was a wonderful gift. And then when that finished, I thought, okay, what do I really want to do? And I've always benefited from coaching and kinesiology and all the things I do. And so I thought, why don't I do that? I could do that because I've got so much out of that. So I went and did a diploma in positive mental health coaching, and I've started coaching one-on-one. And then the other thing I really wanted to do was, I'm a writer. What do I want to write about? I want to write about spirituality because I want to bring that to more people. Mm-hmm. So I got this column. I went and pitched it and got a column in Body and Soul magazine, which I've been doing for about a year now. And I write about spiritual modalities and spiritual concepts and my own spiritual journey every month. And so all of that is in such perfect alignment, and it leaving that job freed me up to do those things that are more in alignment with who I am and who I've become, and the messages that I want to share with others. So it's just, it feels really heaven sent. I wake up just so grateful all the time to be doing this.
Wow. I've loved this conversation. I'm actually doing an international roundtable soon. I'll send you the link if you want to join it, because it's all my spiritual mentors that have been brought along my path, and they've given me downloads. They've poured into me. They've told me things that only I would know, and it's helped me, because in those times, like you say, and you're praying, and I was even taught that if you are praying from a place of desperation at times, like it's the only thing we tend to do, we actually forget about praying for gratitude when we're actually happy. So it's almost like, oh, you only want me when something's not going right. So I actually learned to tap into a lot more things, and some things have happened which are full on. But yeah, the
I would love
experiences.
to be part of that. Sorry to interrupt, Glenn,
That's all right.
because when you were talking through this whole interview, you've been saying my spiritual mentors, and I was thinking, who is this team? I need to know who they are. You've obviously attracted
Well,
some
I've put them
amazing people
together
around.
for a round table. So if you
Amazing.
want to join that round table, you come on, because I just can't wait. I'm just like, this is going to be absolutely amazing. But what's next for you? What's coming up other than the round table?
A few things, actually. So I'm doing the coaching and I'm doing the column, but I'm actually working on a project which is a spiritual book club. And so I'm in the process of getting that into development, and it should be up soon, but it's for people who love spiritual books, which I'm sure you do and a lot of your listeners do. And I'll be interviewing the authors of these books, and then tune in and listen to those interviews. And it's also like a curated list of the most empowering books that I've come across, both for authors who are no longer with us but have made a huge impact to people that are writing these books now, because it's these kind of books that have really helped me along the way. We don't always get access to the teachers, but we can read those books at any time. So I'm really excited about that. I've had to break through some beliefs around, am I a business person? Can I run a business? And I worked with my kinesiologist on kind of pushing through that. So I had a bit of work to do there, and now I'm on my way. So that's what I'm working on.
Wow, you need to check out, if you haven't already. It's a book that changed my life. It's David R. Hawkins' Surrender, The Art of Letting Go. Very spiritual.
I'm reading that right now. You wouldn't believe it. It's on my Kindle right now.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Best book. But where can people find you? Where can people keep up to date with you?
I have a website, jacintatynan.com. I'm on Instagram, Jacinta Tynan. It's all really straightforward. And the website for the Spiritual Book Club will be up soon as well. I say that with hesitation because, you know, when you commit to something like this on air, that it has to happen. So we're in the background working on it, but it's one of those things that I'm going to have to hurry it along now that
divine
I've set
timing.
it up.
Divine. You can't. What is the saying? You can't rush perfection, and nothing's perfect. So it's divine timing. But I just want to say, on behalf of myself, on behalf of the campaign, for everything you've done for it, unbeknownst to you, the reach it's gone to because of what you did for it and helping us. Thank you once again. I'll never be able to say thank you enough to you. But guys, I'm going to put all the links up to where you can find Jacinta. Please check it out. I want to check out the spiritual stuff more. But keep having the hard conversations, guys, as I say, each and every week, because it is the hard conversations that saves lives.